A Father's Story as Told to His Son, written by 동표의. Chapter 1. Around the time of the Korean War. My childhood memories are all about the war, the Korean War, that started in 1950 and lasted until 1953. Korea went through 2-year wars in the span of just 5 years, leaving her land completely destroyed and people in desperate poverty. When I was born, Korea was a colony of Japan, whose war efforts were racing towards a desperate ending. Korea paid an unspeakable price for Japan's losing war. I was too young to remember the hardships endured under Japan's colonization, but I heard stories from the adults around me. I heard about the horrible confiscation of everything useful around the ordinary homes, including brass rice bowls, chopsticks, and spoons. Young men were all drafted onto the battlefield, and the young women were enslaved as military comfort women. People desperately arranged marriages for their children early when they were still literally children. The war personally touched my family, as I remember my grandmother tearfully talking about the second son, my father's younger brother, who was drafted by the Japanese as a student soldier and sent to the Burmese front, where he was killed. When I was about 5 or 6, the Korean War broke out, so my childhood seemed to revolve around war. War breaks out. I was born on December 1, 1944, in Seoseok-dong, Gwangju, the first house I remember, though it's the house we lived in Dongmyeong-dong after Korea's emancipation from Japan. One of my earliest memories of the house is hearing my mother and father whispering to each other urgently one night when they thought their children were all asleep. My father's voice was grave, and my mother, in a characteristic accent, lamented, "My God, war has broken out." At the time, my father, Po Sung-young, was a government official. My mother, Sun-sik Park, had given birth to 3 girls, Young-ja, Lee-suk, and Kyung-hee, in a row after me, the oldest. When the Korean War broke out, my youngest sister was just a baby. In June 1950, as North Korean tanks pushed down into the south ferociously, my father fled to Busan, and we took refuge in Damyang, my mother's hometown. My mother hurriedly wrapped up some essentials for us and loaded those things onto an ox cart, which is how we fled. It is heartbreaking to imagine my mother freeing from a war zone with 4 tiny children. I was the oldest at 5 without her husband. Damyang was a small village deep in the Korean countryside. The village was surrounded by a bamboo forest. Damyang was and still is well known for its bamboo forest and bamboo products. Our life in Damyang was hard. As remote as Damyang was, the war still reached us. One thing I remember was how little food we had. People would dry grain and peppers in their yards, but the North Korean soldiers came in and simply confiscated everything. The soldiers then returned and took household dog. I was too young to appreciate fully what I was going on, so I would whine and cry every time I was hungry. One time, I remember someone giving me a piece of a potato that they had managed to hide from the North Korean soldiers. Delighted, I ran into the surrounding bamboo forests with a piece of potato in my hands and prayed in the forest until the sunset. I often prayed in that forest, which was littered with stumps of bamboo trees that had been cut to make things like baskets and pillows for sale at the village market. I cut my foot on a sharp bamboo stump. I cried out as blood gushed from my foot. People rushed to help me, but there was no medicine or medical attention they could give me in that remote village. Instead, they applied doenjang, bean paste, to my cut and wrapped my foot up in strips of old cloth. Bean paste was the best medicine available. Fortunately, my foot healed, but I still have a deep scar on my right foot. Later, we moved from Damyang to my grandfather's house in Gwangju. The war was being prolonged by China's support for the North Koreans. The textile factory near my grandfather's house in Gwangju was a frequent target of bombs. When the bombing started, we fled in the makeshift bomb shelter to wait out the bombing. The shelter we fled to was actually just a small cement structure my grandmother used to store food like her kimchi, doenjang, and gochujang, red pepper paste. At first, I was scared by the sound of bombing, but I got used to it quickly. During one bombing raid, I actually stuck my neck out of the shelter to take a look, and I saw what seemed like a sky on fire, with the planes thundering through. My grandmother pulled me back immediately, yelling, "A bomb could fall on your head." One day, my father visited us at grandfather's house. He was still separated from us, and we did not see him often during the war. My grandfather's dog had just had puppies before my father's arrival, and I was excited to show my father the puppies. I crawled under the floor to bring one of the puppies out to show my father, but the dog bit me. My father saw me crawling out from under the floor, crying over my bloody hand. The dog was a stray that my grandmother had simply adopted. We knew nothing about the dog's health, worried that I might contract rabies. My father took me straight to a doctor. I had to undergo a month of rabies shots. I still remember my parents commending me over how well I took the entire course of rabies shots. However, as I grew up, I was always skinny and physically weak, and my parents blamed my early rabies shots for this. Elementary school. The war raged on, and life still moved forward. I reached school age and entered Sosok Elementary School. There were many telltale signs that I was going to school in a time of war. The school building bore scars of war. At the edge of the playground, a series of concert buildings were erected to house children fleeing from the war. Many children were older than they would have been ordinarily, having missed their regular school start dates because of the ongoing war. Sometimes the school gave us the powdered milk donated by the American Army. We would stand in a long line, waiting to get the powdered milk being served from a large drum, but we had no cups. Instead, we made a cup of our hands and had the powdered milk dumped into our hands. We had never seen powdered milk before, so we just put the whole handful in our mouths. Of course, we choked on all the powder at first, but when it melted a bit, it tasted really good, or at least it seemed to then. I also remember how poor all of our school supplies were. The stationery was all terrible. The pencils hardly wrote, the erasers didn't erase. At the end of school each day, vendors lined up in front of the school to try to sell us Swiss and arrowroots. The arrowroot vendor cut the root into small pieces with a saw. We would chew the roots even though it was covered with dirt. Another vendor melted sugar and shaped the sugar into different figures, which was, of course, very popular. Walking out to the school gate, in the opposite direction of home, there was Namgwangju train station. The neighborhood was full of rice paddies and gardens. After school, I often went there with friends to catch locusts and tadpoles in the rice paddies. I also had a friend a few years older than me who lived near Namgwangju Station. His mother made a Korean taffy called yacht, which his father sold from a handcart. The yacht would be cut with heavy metal scissors and a chisel, and some yacht vendors would go through neighborhoods clinking their scissors and chisels. Like ice cream trucks ring their bells in America, nobody paid in cash those days. Instead, people bartered with things like old shoes, bottles, or other worn-out household goods. The amount of yacht you would get was totally up to the yacht vendor's discretion, which was probably the origin of the Korean expression on a yacht vendor's whim. When I visited, my classmates' mother gave me so much yacht I could not eat it all. I put the leftovers in my pocket, but it melted by the time I got home, where I was scolded for ruining my clothes. Thai roofed house at Namdong. After the war ended, we moved to Namdong in Gwangju. The house was a typical Thai roofed house, having two buildings and a courtyard in between. We lived in the larger building with my grandparents. My aunt, my father's sister lived in the smaller building with my family. Even though the house was small, it was always full of people. There was a small garden just inside the gate where we grew peppers and pumpkins. Next to it was a hen house where Grandma raised the chickens. Beyond the front gate of our home, there was a vacant lot to the right. My best friend, Ungbe, lived across the lot. In Ungbe's garden, there were peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, and pumpkins growing. When the eggplants ripened, Ungbe and I, along with the other kids in the neighborhood, picked them and ate them. When Ungbe's mother caught us, she would yell, "Ungbe야, you are picking the eggplants again," then I would run away. Right next to the Ungbe's house was a church that had been demolished by the bombing. Apparently, the bomb missed its intended targets, the City Hall building, which was just a few steps away. The City Hall building stood undamaged. Further away from the church site, there was a row of houses burned and partially destroyed by the bombing. Being kids, we were able to find places to play even amidst the rubble. The church site was a good playground because we could spend hours there searching for broken pieces of glass and tile, which to our eyes were shiny, beautiful little treasures. The half-burned houses were also good places to explore. Despite the damage to the houses, they were occupied by dozens of families who had fled the war from the north. They spoke in a different dialect with a different accent. They also received relief goods and American Army ration boxes. Sometimes these families would generously share some of what they had in their boxes with us, like biscuits and chocolate, and we thought it was the best tasting stuff in the world. A little further away, across an intersection, was an orphanage. There was an overflow of children who lost or were separated from their parents during the war. Orphans were everywhere. The intersection was like a playground for the children of Namdong. I played there almost every day, hide and seek, 자치기, stick hitting, 구슬치기, grass bead rolling, and the rolling of hoop. I had so much fun that I was there until dark, until my sisters or my mother would come to take me home. From time to time, an American Jeep would pass through the intersection. This was a very exciting event for us. We would stop playing and run after the Jeep yelling, "Hello, hello." Sometimes the American soldiers would throw us chewing gum or chocolate. Years later, when I would see pictures of Vietnamese children during the Vietnam War, I was struck by how similar the scenes were to what we did as kids. I felt tremendous sympathy and thought, that was me. I was just like that. Another favorite place for us to play was the stream called Gwangju Chun. It was perfect for kids to play in the water. Many women would do their laundry there as well. Right next to the street was a Minari drop water garden. The owner would show up in his high boots to pick Minari in the mud bed. I wondered how any plant could grow in such a dirty mud bed and avoided eating Minari when it showed up on my dinner table. As we played in the water, sometimes a leech would stick to our legs, but we weren't alarmed. We just pulled it off, set it on rock, and went back to playing. Across the stream was Sajikdan Park, which was the small mountain. There was a broadcasting station on the way up to the peak where you could look down on the whole city of Gwangju from a pavilion. Mountains were generally bare in those days, but Sajikdan Park was relatively lush with trees. One of our assignments during summer vacations was to collect insects, so we went up Sajikdan Park to catch butterflies, dragonflies, and the cicadas. Cicadas were tricky to catch, so when you caught one, it was like hitting the jackpot. Grandma, during the war and immediately thereafter, disabled soldiers, beggars, and petty thieves were everywhere. You could not walk the streets freely in those days. People were required to present an ID card at makeshift checkpoints. When my grandmother went out shopping, I liked to tag along. My grandmother, though, didn't want me following her because I always pestered her, asking her to buy me things like candy. One day, she was quietly sneaking out of the gate to go to the market, but I spotted her. I sprang into action, following her at a discreet distance, like a small James Bond. I followed her all the way to the market, and she never noticed me. The entrance of the market was an ID checkpoint, but my grandmother had forgotten her ID in a hurry to leave the house without my noticing. After she was stopped at the checkpoint, she turned around and spotted me. She beckoned to me, and I ran toward her. She asked me to get her ID card, which was on top of her sewing box. I ran like the wind and brought her ID card back to her. After that, she didn't try to shake me off. When she went shopping, she let me accompany her through the market. If I was good, she would let me have a treat, like the salty ears on seaweed, which is the most flavorful part. I became my grandmother's entourage. Sometimes grandma would have to go to a large market, which was an hour's walk away. It was really big, and there were so many things to see there. During the Gulbi, dried yellow Kobina, season 10, 20 of the Yongguang Gulbi would be tied together on big poles and hung out to dry in the sun like laundry. It was a cotton of Gulbi. Each Gulbi was so big that Grandma could not handle its weight even when she only bought one string of about 10 fish. To get them home, we needed to hire a man who carried an A-frame carrier on his back. A good young one could be was about the size of the adult arm. Cut into 3 parts, it would be enough to feed 3 people. The middle was always for my father, or my father, because it had the most to eat. The other 2 parts were shared by the 2 women and children. As the eldest son, I usually got the tail and rather than the head. Some of the fish had eggs inside, which was a great treat. I have always loved gulbi since my grandchild, and my love of gulbi is well known within our family. Years later, your grandmother, my mother-in-law, would grill gulbi for me when I visited. It is hard to find the quality gulbi these days. A few years ago, I went to Yongguang to have it. I saw a man drying gulbi and talked to him. I learned that nowadays, gulbi is no longer caught near Yongguang, but imported from China. They only dried in the sea breeze of Yongguang, but I guess they make it a global product now. I would also accompany my grandma to the local herbal medicine house, which was on the way to my school. The house was large, and the medicine man's office was in the guest wing. A large straw mat was spread out in the courtyard in front of the guest wing. On the straw mat, all sorts of herbs would be drying. People waited their turn on the floor until a handsomely dressed young man took us in to see the actual medicine man. When it was our turn, we went inside to find an old man dressed up to look like a wise sage. He listened to my grandmother's ailments, but then noticed me hiding in my grandma's skirts. Grandma always introduced me as her first grandson because it was important to her that I was first son, continuing an uninterrupted line of 5 generations of first sons. The old man told his assistant to cut me a piece of sweet licorice root to chew, and my grandma told me to thank the man. Because of her accent, my grandma actually never pronounced my name correctly. She pronounced my name Dengpya instead of Dongpyo. In the medicine room, there are dozens of medicine cabinets with hundreds of small boxes full of different medicines surrounding the room like a folding screen. Sacks of medicine were also hanging on the wall. As Grandma described her ailments, the old man would quickly write out his prescription in Chinese characters and hand it to his assistant, who then cut and gathered the various roots and leaves. I can still picture and smell the medicine house in my memory. I also followed my grandma to Deogyang to visit my great-grandfather. We took a train from Gwangju Station or Namgwangju Station. I liked riding the coal-stained black train pulled by a huffing steam locomotive. I would stick my head out of the window to feel the wind on my face. I ended up looking like a coal miner with coal dust all over my face. To this day, I still love to travel by train. My great-grandfather lived in Deogyang, Poseong-gun, and Grandma visited him every fall during the harvest season. He was a farmer with a reddish face, big and strong for his age, who worked his rice paddies and other fields. He even had a small mountain full of chestnut trees. In Deogyang, there was an elementary school my father attended. Just inside the gate, there was a cow shed, and the cow mooed a greeting when we entered the great-grandfather's house. I learned about sweet potato farming in Deogyang. When you pulled one sweet potato, a whole bunch of sweet potatoes came out with it. So you need to push with both feet. Great-grandfather favored me as the first son of the fifth generation. When my 3 sisters were born in a row after me, he said that my name should be changed to Dongjin. It means gentle and would augur the birth of other son. I never changed my name, but my mother did eventually have my 2 brothers, Dongpyo and Donguk, making 6 of us in total. Today, in Deogyang, my great-grandfather's house and rice paddies still remain next to our family cemetery. In the family cemetery, my great-grandfather, who was so strong, my grandma, my grandfather, my father, and my mother are resting together.